the disappointing part is that, and even my students point out, is that we're adding entitlements before we're reforming the entitlements that we have already. I think that just 7 years of state-based market approach systems, and we've seen reforms in the state of Minnesota that have worked, I think that would be more of the answer than what we have. Now that said, now the Supreme Court has upheld it, and now we're going to see the taxes come down, because this thing is filled with, I counted 20 as I read through the articles today, 20 different taxes that are included in this. And it's going to I think it's going to come to about a $500 billion total tax increase. From my opinion, there are some parts to it that I don't like the federal government being involved in, like throwing out mandates. We've seen at the state government what that's like for local government when I sat on the city council. So I've seen that at every level of government. So there are some parts that I would take apart. There are some parts that the state of Minnesota already does. My pushback would be, what can we do to make sure that states have that freedom to reform their systems? The first statement that has to be made here is that if you do nothing, these systems go away, these entitlements go away completely. And those dates are moving closer to us and closer to us. What Congressman Ryan proposes with Medicare is keeping it there for people who are 55 plus, which is wonderful. I think seniors can get behind that. I think seniors want these programs to be around for their grandkids. So I think they can buy into it and be a part of the solution. Also, when you look at Medicare and how he wants to fully fund the MSA accounts, I think that's a good solution. It allows low-income people to utilize the system and still see how the cost drivers work from a supply and demand angle, and believing in prices, allocating goods efficiently. People need to see how much things cost. And if they do, and we found that in the state of Minnesota as well, when people see how much things cost, then they adjust their consumption and the program becomes viable. Yes, they will, because they risk adjust it. If you have more health conditions, with that $11,000, I believe that Congressman Ryan has proposed to put into those accounts, or to allow you to have you use, risk adjusted, inflation adjusted, and income adjusted, which I think is interesting. And you could transfer that over to some of the reforms that I've looked at with Social Security. But when we do that and we income adjust things or means test them, now we have to start looking at them as an actual tax, not so much an entitlement program that you're paying into, because your benefits are will be adjusted by what you've brought in income. In my mind, something has to work, something has to go forward, and I think that's, even though there are Republicans who, the no new revenue, no new taxes. Well, you know what, we have to look at situations like this, and maybe it would be a great compromise to go into the tax code and then reform it so that the people who are paying those higher taxes are now paying a lower marginal rate. I like a flat tax, so that's my preference. What a great compromise. Yes, you're going to get, the entitlements will be means tested, but those people who do have small businesses, like my wife and I, doing your taxes is now much easier. I like the block grants to the states. This is one thing that I think is very simple. I believe in states. I believe in Jim Abler and Representative Abler, Representative Gottwald, to Senator Han. I believe that they're more able to make better decisions, and Governor Dayton. I think they can work together and find what Minnesota needs. Also, one that is moving up rapidly towards insolvency. So how do you keep this program around? And so we do have to look at that retirement age and adjusting that by small increments, starting in, I think the platform starts in 2014, just 3-month increments to take that up. We shouldn't have people relying on Social Security as their only stream of income. But we need to make sure it's there for the people who are paying into it. And adjusting for retirement, and also means testing it, as I mentioned before, is a big part of that. The reason why people are screaming to end the Fed is because they want to end the Fed's policies, first of all. Ending the Fed, just acts and the Fed would be somewhat catastrophic to the overall global environment. But I think working class people are starting to see that, well, what the Fed does and its inflationary measures, is really catastrophic to them and their ability to save and someday retire. So I think that's where the frustration comes from. Now, how could we get into this system and change it? First of all, you audit it so that Americans know where the money's going. Remember, this is a private bank that's given a monopoly over our currency. There's really two areas right now in Minnesota, in the United States, that are booming: Washington, D.C. and North Dakota. And isn't it interesting that Washington, D.C. is booming because of borrowed and printed money, and North Dakota is booming because of real economic growth? And Minnesota is more like, and we want to be more like, North Dakota. You've got to shrink the size of the federal workforce. You know, because as they're not building manufacturing centers in Washington, D.C. They're Keynesian measures. You have consumption, investment, which is the private sector, and then government, and then the foreign sector. Well, plainly put, when the government grows, C&I have no option but to shrink if there's a set pie. Let markets drive it. Don't try to pick and choose the winners and losers. HSBC, a large bank, has said that the low carbon conservation, environmental approach, those industries is a $2 trillion industry in the next 10 years because young people are really getting into conservation. That's great, or environmental, however you want to say it, but they want low carbon footprint, okay? They want to buy low carbon products. They want cars that don't burn as much gas. That's great. Well, if you can't go and as a private company take part in a $2 trillion sector of the economy, if you can't find a way forward, you shouldn't be a company. We can't get out of debt with more debt. And that's what we have to be cautious of with our involvement with the International Monetary Fund. Are we going to be bailing out these European banks like we bailed out our banks? Because I personally, as an American, as a Minnesotan, I don't want to be involved in that. Europe has its problems. Europe has spent too much. You tied the currency together, but you didn't tie the financing together. I see the best way to help these countries is by trading with them. If we trade with each other, that's also a great national security. To promote our national security, we trade with other countries, and then we're integrated with them, and then we're less likely to be aggressive towards them, and they're less likely to be aggressive towards us. So that's the way I see that we can help these countries. I would be going to the U.S. Senate as a public school teacher and a parent of 4 kids, and that's who we have to go and do this for. No longer can we have the pulling in every industry. You know, Dwight Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex. Well, currently I see it as an agricultural industrial complex, a healthcare industrial complex. You go right down the line, and all of these things have been brought into Washington, D.C., and I'm sorry, but it's so that career politicians can raise money from those lobbyists. And that is wrong, because we're not keeping our kids in mind, we're not keeping our posterity in mind. That means going in and sitting down next to the people who you ideologically are opposed to. And it's amazing that when you get to talk, you know, sure, there are the talking points, and I understand the political virtue of things. But when we get to the economic virtue and we have to do something, that's when people start to actually put their priorities on the table and start to talk about where they could agree. And that's what you have to do in terms of the spending, in terms of entitlements. Thoughtfulness. I mean, to have a 17.1% flat tax, you're raising the 10% rate, so you're actually, you know, and some groups look at that and they say, oh, he's raising taxes. No, I'm simplifying the system because in a dynamic scoring method, this actually comes out better. And if that makes a certain interest group mad, so be it.